The build progress at Chadwick is going very well, so now it's time for part 1 of the branch line station build. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and before we kick off, I'd like to draw your attention to an error that I made last week. Where I looked at forming parcels trains, including the new siphon Gs from a Cura scale. Marvellous. Because when you make up these authentic trains, they have corridors between, between the siphon Gs and full brakes, etc. Because often you would find staff working in these trains as they trundle around. Now, what was the mistake? The mistake was I didn't include a BSK. A BSK, I hear you say? A brake second corridor. Couldn't make it up, could you? So K stands for corridor because C stands for composite. So BSK, brake second corridor. But why would you need one of that? Well, because the trains that I made up don't have any toilet facilities or rest area. So often you'll see in photographs there's a BSK tucked in there somewhere. So I need to put that straight. But let's have a look at 2 BSKs that I do have. So here are my 2 BSKs. This is a more recent production from Wagon, and this is an old production from Hornby. But the reason I want to mention it is just a little snippet that I picked up the other day, because on this one, the old one, there's 2 lumps in the roof, and on this one here there are 2 blanking plates. So what's all that about, I hear you say? Well, these 2 lumps here were actually periscopes for the guard, and I find that quite fascinating. So he would know exactly where the train is and stuff, whether the train's intact, everything else, without necessarily leaning out of the window. And then on the more up-to-date coach, then obviously you can see there are these 2 blanking plates. So here we have my little parcels train pulled by a warship, and in the train there's a gov, and then there's the 3 Cura scale siphon Gs, followed by a 51-foot LMS brake, then a full brake, and at long last a BSK, a brake second corridor. So now they have somewhere to go. Now, as this train heads into the Helix, you may recall that I mentioned in the last video that I had a cunning plan about the repositioning of the dreaded bookcase. Well, as you can see, the bookcase has gone. A few weeks ago I mentioned that I had a cunning plan in mind to reposition this bookcase. It has to go because I can't even get to the books, and of course it blocks my access behind the Helix here to service both the Helix and the branch line station. So it's got to go. So I'll show you what I have in mind. Things never change, do they? A solar panel scheme being done in your area. Yeah, right. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to apologise to any carpenters who've been watching what's going on. It looks even worse close up. No carpenters were harmed during the construction or the reconstruction of this bookcase. And the idea was to go from this to this. Hopefully I haven't pulled any wires out from behind, but I shall have to run a few trains and check it out. And once I've brought all the stuff back in from the tables outside, I think it's a pretty nifty job. Need another couple of shelves though on that centre section. And now, as you can see, I have full access around this side of the Helix. Of course, on top of here, I'm planning to build the branch line station and also some kind of freight facility. Now, it's possible for me currently to climb inside here, just get a small set of steps, hop on the inside and do any work that I need to do. And a day or two ago, I put on this wooden batten to help support the first of the two boards that will go on here. Of course, once the baseboards are on top, to get access into the Helix will be much more difficult or nigh on impossible. It's possible to clean all the tracks with the exception of this quadrant here, because you physically won't be able to get to it. I mean, it will just be impossible, so you'll have to clean it by use of a track cleaning vehicle really to run up and down there. So the first thing to do really before you go any further is to make sure that the Helix runs perfectly, which it does. I don't get derailments on this Helix that are due to the Helix. The only derailments I ever get is when it's a piece of rolling stocks. You know, you get a breakaway with a bad coupling. I think it's the Helgian dogfish. They were all over the place. They're running much better now. Now I've weighted them down and sorted the couplings. But I very, very rarely get derailments on the Helix, and then they are always to do with the rolling stock rather than the build quality. I did take a lot of time to get this right. Anyway, I shall pop on the two baseboards that cover this so you can see what enormous amount of real estate I've got to play with on here. Now oddly, these two boards are actually made of 13mm pop ply. That's that one, and the front one is actually two boards which I've put a bracing piece and glued together, and all I've done is glued like I say, a piece of timber across the front of it, and hopefully this will kind of balance in place here, if you can see what I'm getting at. Sort of there. And now I imagine you can see that this is a huge area. Now with the Mark I coach you have a better idea of how much space is available. Of course I've got to sort out the supports for this, and I'm going to put some threaded bar extensions on the Helix supports themselves to go up and to come under these and support it, as I did similarly on the Helix 2. I'm also going to paint these shortly before we continue, because when you bring the camera in close, the white of this board will kind of burn out in the camera, so I shall probably paint both of these boards brown as a base colour, and I'm not going to cover them with cork as I normally would, because there's not going to be that much train traffic here. There's going to be just the two tracks, two state platforms 1 and 2 of the branch line station, and the more challenging aspect of designing a workable goods yard that will have playability, because I want a guy to work this yard and a guy to work the goods yard that will go above the reverse loops. so that you can send trains to each other. So it's trying to figure it out that train controller is not going to do all the work here. A train controller will run the scenic trains, but we want to be able to invite friends, so to have a day's days playing trains, and enjoy each other's company and to give each other's challenges. So I shall come back to you shortly, but I will want you to come up with a decent track plan or some suggestions on how these little fan of sidings would best work. Now, it is of course useful to take inspiration from the real thing, and I go to Weymouth quite regularly, and although Lee and I had done some work regarding Barnstaple Station, I found Weymouth rather interesting. Now, looking at this image here, over on the far right hand side you can see a DMU. Now that's in there on platform 1. Abreast of that is platform 2, and over on the left hand side is platform 3, and then there's a wall, and then you come to those houses. Now the houses are very interesting because there's a road in front of them and it kind of butts up against the wall of the railway. Now I quite like this because in our station I thought that we would have those 2 tracks and one platform serving both lines, both platform 1 and platform 2, and have adequate space to take a 3-car DMU. And then looking at the houses, obviously we need to build in natural infrastructure, housing and the like, into our layout, and then you can see a road with car parking. And I thought, that's a pretty nifty idea. So here we are with the 2 boards in place, though they're not secured, they're just placed on top of the Helix. So here are the 2 tracks in place, sort of roughly, and there'll be a platform running between them, sort of platform 1, platform 2, and then some kind of a station building affair at the bottom end here. So that's the sort of general sort of feel of it. Of course, what really matters is how long the trains are that come into this station. Now, it seemed logical to me that you need enough room for a 3-car DMU. Now we need a little bit of station buildings, let's say, and this is a good placeholder. It's a bit on the large side for this station, but it'll do for now. But what is more interesting is the distance behind the station building, which is about 12 inches or 30 centimetres, because that will give us room for a roadway and a car park and the supporting infrastructure for the station. Of course, from the Weymouth photos, we saw a row of houses here. Now, this isn't helped by this back scene, and in fact, this back scene was a bad move, because even though it's listed as 00, it's more like O gauge. I mean, these houses are quite substantial, so I will need to lose the sort of detail of these houses, but not insurmountable. I just need a few trees. But what are we going to put along here? Well, the first thing to look at is what I already own, and I have 2 options. And my first option, or my first 2 options as it were, are these row of terraced houses, and they would fit in there quite well. But you can see what I mean now against the back scene. And of course, they don't have to be that way around. They can, of course, be the other way around. So therefore I get the street frontage and the street before we come up against the wall of the railway. But I think I have a better option that would take a little more effort but could well be worth it. And I have this that was recovered from a previous layout. And you can see obviously the buildings are further back, and there is a retaining wall there, and of course there will be a wall against the railway, and the road network can come down. Obviously this is very embryonic, but it is quite a reasonable thought. If I add another strip of houses, you can see how easily this option could be developed. So now let's switch to the freight side of things, and as you've seen already, there's this little point here that divides the approach lines into two, and then of course they run up into the boards. Now I've just popped in a couple of little tracks there, so we've got the basics of what's going on. And at the far end you can see that I've put in a runaround with two right hand points. Now I've put in place a short freight train consisting of a guards van, two conflats and four vans. And what brought that in? Well, let's say that high mech brought them in, and the high mech is uncoupled and it's gone through into the head shunt and is now free to come around, perhaps onto the back of the train, take off the guards van and start to think about building the train to leave. But of course we need the infrastructure now to unload these vans. Now these old Hornby platform sections would seem to be the right sort of size for some kind of unloading facility. But now coming back up the layout to the original piece of track, if we were to insert a left hand point here, then this would give us the facility to bring in another unloading siding on the other side of this dock in that sort of configuration there. And if we were to add in a vehicle for a sense of scale to do some unloading here, that's where we would end up. We could of course start to add in another siding if we so wished to run down there, but I'm not too sure at this stage whether that's really necessary. Now one thing I have done is I've bridged these two boards, but with one piece of flex track, that's not really the end of the world. If I just pop a little porter cabin on that platform, you can see the sort of general scale, and using one of the Expo model maker's scale rulers, you can see that it's 34 foot across is the scale distance. So a reasonable sized building will soon eat up the space in that area. I've also added in a couple of other pieces of rolling stock, and we've got at the far end there one of the Acura scale Siphon Gs, one of my parcel bubble cars, and a little shunter. So you can see how this place would look and the operational interest that we can have. And then coming around to the other side, we see that we've got enough space here for buses, etc., drop off to the station. Then obviously we could have fenced this lot off with a gateway here running up into the goods yard, and then obviously we can then move into the more countryside and build up the hill as it would be, because obviously we've got the lines that go into the Helix, so you'd expect there to be a rise in the landform here. But hopefully this will have a little bit of potential. Now let's take a look at it with any rail. Now this is the original diagram provided by Lee Stoddart, and obviously I've changed this around a little, I've straightened it out and tweaked the freight yard side. And now looking at the newer version, those are the two platforms over on the right hand side, and here are the new sidings. So the idea is my train will then come in on that centre line, uncouple, go through those 2 points, and it will be free to go back on the other end, and if necessary jump on the other end of the train. There's our little goods depot and the new siding. Lots of potential. Enough room at the bottom here for traffic and buses, the goods yard entrance here, and then of course we're back into the countryside once more. So what do you think of this design? I've obviously spent quite a bit of time on it, and with the assistance of Lee Stoddart, between us we came up with the original plan, which I've now tweaked a little bit, flipped the sidings around and popped another siding in. But this is by no means the end of the game. We could expand out this way, but then again more track isn't necessarily better. Sometimes less is better. So it's just trying to keep it in proportion, but from an operator's point of view, it's got to show operational interest. A point I haven't mentioned is just behind this van here, there will go a KD electromagnetic uncoupler, the old push button one, similar to I've used on the other side. Where you use the standard KD magnets, the one that just sit on the track, they must be, well, and the electromagnetic ones, they have to be on a straight. KDs really don't like to uncouple on the curve, so it's just something to be aware then. But this is the way that it sort of feels. I mentioned about the size of this expanse of these little old Hornby platforms there. That distance there isn't cast in stone. I think the best thing to do is to try to find the building that will fit there and then expand or contract the platform or the loading area accordingly. It's trying to find the best building that will fit in there, in with a late 60s, early 70s sort of weathered feel, let's just say. So it's been kicking around for some years of what would fit in there and look right. And obviously we've got to be able to do a loading bay and all the rest of the guff. I'm sure there'll be crane, handheld forklifts, that sort of sort of pumpy up action ones to go into that area. And also there's a bit of an expanse in front of that platform area that we could do with a little bit of interest. So that's the kind of thing where I am, and this is the end of the branch line station part 1. Before I come back to you on this, I will have hopefully finalise the track plan. Don't forget about the help here. Finalise the track plan, and then take both boards out. This board here is quite straightforward with these two tracks to get those in the right position, wired and set in, and there'll be a linking track between this board and the next one. And this one takes a little bit more thought. I've got to be able to make sure there's enough room here for a high mech or a class 25 or the teddy bear shunter, because those teddy bears were actually designed to go on sort of what we say rural lines. So there's no reason why she can't bring in a small van train from the other side of the layout. And of course I've got the parcel side into here, so there is a great deal of flexibility, but of course it's having the interest. Now, one thing that you may not be aware of, and that is train controller. If there's any train controller experts listening to this, I need to find a method now where the operator here can communicate with train controller to the operator over there on a sort of a tablet affair, so he can change the points, sort his loco out and send it on his way. And I'm thinking of a tablet format that can communicate with a PC. Now, I'm a kind of an Apple person. I believe in fruit-based computer systems, but a train controller isn't like that. So I've invested in another computer to run with that. And besides that, my old iMac isn't capable of running Premiere Pro. It's too old. So actually, whoops. Actually, I've got more PCs than Apples now. Anyway, yes, I need a communication system to go from one to the other. So if you're a sort of a train controller whiz and you know a system of doing that, it'll be much appreciated. Because what I don't want to do is start slapping screens all over the place where a remote operator could operate through a tablet, communicate to a system so everyone can see what's going on with what train. Bit deep there, isn't it? There we are. Okay, let's wrap it up. Thanks for watching. If you want to be a patron, there's the button. If you haven't subscribed, you should be ashamed of yourself, and there's the button there. See you in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, don't forget to watch a couple of videos. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.